Yeah, it definitely rains Tasmania, northern New South Wales. It rains in a few spots in Australia, but I mean that there's so much water locked up in Australia. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like with the cotton industry,
Yeah.
and
Sugar.
our rivers in Victoria. And yeah, but the sugar industry doesn't take the water that the cotton industry takes. It's on a different side of the Great Dividing Range. So the sugar
Right.
is on the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range, and the water that's actually being locked up is on the western side of the Great Dividing Range. So our politicians, when they come into politics, they get a water allowance as far as credits go. So that means they get to own water. The politicians, as soon as they're put into office, they're given a certain amount of water. Like they actually own water as soon as they become politicians in Australia. So it's like
what do you mean by own?
Well, they get a certain amount of gigaliters, allocated to them as human beings when they become politicians in Australia. So then they can decide what they do with that water. They can sell that
as an individual or as a representative.
No, as an individual. Yep.
What the fuck?
So they can, yeah, bro, it's fucking massive. It's the biggest scam ever. So then they can, they can lease.
Where do we find this information? Just like I need to do an info wars on.
It's online. It's getting about. Like there's been a few amazing documentaries about it. But like, where has the water in South Australia and Victoria and New South Wales gone, and who's in control of it, and where are these dams and where are these allocations going to? Because farmers get a certain allocation. A lot of it's like row crop farmers or wheat farmers or cotton farmers. They get an allocation to use a certain amount of water that comes out of the Murray-Darling system. And then that water comes actually from Queensland. It's amazing. Comes from up in Queensland, goes all the way through New South Wales, through Victoria, and ends up in South Australia. And is no longer flowing into the ocean in South Australia because it's been taken along the way by all of these different row crop farms. And this is where the whole vegan cows use more water than row crops, which is just bullshit, but I won't get into that. But so the politicians get an allocation of water, and then they can decide between themselves or individually whether they go, well, I own 50,000 gigalitres, say, of water, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to this person who owns this farm, and they can pay me to lease that water, which the Australian people actually own, and it comes out of the water system.
Yeah.
So then that farmer can give whomever politician, grab those rights for that water, and they can just suck 50,000 gigalitres of water out and put it into a dam on their property. And they're like, well, I've got the allocation to do that.
Yeah.
So our politicians are actually making money from removing water from our river systems and putting it into dams so that it can irrigate crops such as cotton and rice. It's like Australia is the driest continent on earth, and we produce so much rice, it's ridiculous. And it's like, what the hell are we doing producing rice? Like, we're not a tropical country. We're not in the, in the equator region where most of the rice in the world is from. And like cotton takes so much water, but it's like, it's just this scam that the politicians are allowed to be given water.